Okay, I'd like, is it a go?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome everyone to the January 20th, 2021 Little Miami Joint Fire and Rescue District's board meeting. This time I need a roll call, please.
Mr. Hudson,
Here, I'm sorry.
Mr. Lamar,
It's here. Thank you.
Mr. Lancer,
Here.
Mr. Shelton,
Here.
Ms. Taylor,
Here.
Mr. Van Harn.
Here.
In your packets, everyone should have received a copy of the December 16th, 2020 trustees meeting. Is there any corrections, additions, deletions? At this time, I need a motion to adopt or to approve the minutes from December 16th.
Oh, motion.
You have a second?
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the minutes from December 16th, 2020 have been approved. As in any other year, the first order of business for your first meeting is to elect officers for the upcoming year. At this time, I would like to open it up to the board for nominees for officers, and we can start with the president. Are there any nominees?
I would nominate Mr. Shelton to continue as president.
Any other nominees? Okay, can we have roll call, please?
Mr. Hudson,
Yes.
Mr. Lamar,
Yes.
Mr. Lancer,
Yes.
Mr. Shelton,
Yes.
Ms. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Van Harn.
Yes.
Thank you for the confidence that you've had so far in me. With that, we need a nominee for vice president. Any nominees?
Who currently is vice president?
Who's that, Melissa?
I'm sorry, who's currently vice president? I should know that, but I don't.
Mr. Marks, or Mr. Hirth wasn't he, Jenny?
Mr. Marks.
Mr. Marks was, and when he resigned, we never replaced. So at this time, we do not have a vice president.
I would suggest that we ask our golf Manor partners if one of them would like to serve as vice president.
Mr. Lancer,
I'm happy to. If Roger, either one of us is fine. Happy to do it.
yeah, I nominate Mr. Lancer. We have a second on that?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Hudson,
Yes.
Mr. Lamar,
Yes.
Mr. Lancer,
Yes.
Mr. Shelton,
Yes.
Ms. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Van Harn.
Yes.
So for the coming year, we have Mr. Shelton for board president and Mr. Lancer for the vice president. Do we have any communications?
No communications this evening.
On to the clerk's report.
Okay, in your packets were the December financial information for the end of 2020. On my sheet here. So the carryover balance as of December 31st was $416,020.94. In December, receipts to note were that we did receive the second half of our bond proceeds. That's the tax exempt portion from the Build America bonds. So we received $59,806 from that. that all went towards the debt service payment this year. So that's kind of an in and out receipt and expense every year. And we also received additional monies from Ohio Bureau of Workers' Compensation regarding COVID, as most municipalities probably did. These funds are not earmarked for anything in particular, but was a proceed to the district that we put into our receipts in December, and that amount was $38,378. So that was a nice receipt, unexpected receipt to receive at the end of the year. For expenses in December, ones to note, we did have, again, just like November, several HRA reimbursements on the check register. Those are all the payments made to Navia. Really, they are deductions from our checking account when an employee turns in the receipts for medical services. That's the reimbursement. And so at the end of the year, we do get a lot of them submitted because the monies are use it or lose it in a calendar year. We also had some EMS supplies. There's a vendor on there that may not be familiar. I think it might be a new one. Teleflex. Those were for I think 10. It was quite a bit. Boxes of needles for EMS supplies. That was $1,100. And then you'll see two expenses. They were both under vehicle maintenance and repair. To Bramble and Jerry's Auto, $3,300. That was in regards to repairs to the vehicle that struck the fire hydrant in Gulf Manor a month or two ago. So that was for the repairs to that vehicle. But if there's anything else on the check register, please ask in a minute. And then I'll also refer to under new business, we will have a resolution. It's a supplemental appropriation to finish out 2020 in the ambulance and emergency fund. We were a little over in EMS supplies for the year. So it's transferring $760 from payroll in that fund to EMS supplies, which really isn't that bad considering the additional PPE that was purchased in 2020. I actually thought that account would go higher than it did. And we did receive earlier in the year a benefit from BWC as well of $6,000 to spend towards PPE. So that account ended up doing pretty good for the year. So that is my report for now, but please ask if there's any particular questions.
Do we have any questions for Mrs. Cameron?
I have a question. In the revenue, it looks like the state of Ohio rollback was about 33% higher than anticipated, and the other income was higher than anticipated. Is that typical? And where does that kind of come from?
So we do budget conservatively on our levy receipts. So I can't quote right now if that percentage, how much better we were than the past. We kind of look at what we got in years past. You know, valuations go up, great, even better. But we don't try to estimate for the penny. So we do tend to be more conservative on those receipts, and then on the expenses on the other end. So we know we're not going to be off the mark for anything. But I could look back in past years to see if those percentages are all the same. I just can't remember off the top of my head. But it is typical for us to under budget, so to speak, the receipts. Try to be realistic in the ballpark, but not overblow it or expect too much and then have a shortfall.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Are we filing the vehicle damage with the insurance company, or we have, and then they'll just send us a check?
We
Or
have,
not?
and I'll let Acting Chief Timmers answer that.
We're going through an insurance, Melissa.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Melissa, did that answer your question? Do you need?
I didn't know if the deductible is so high at some point we would not file it. I don't know what the deductible is. I don't need to. I just was curious. Sometimes agencies carry really high deductibles as a cost savings measure. And when you're down at a few grand, it may not be beneficial to file. So it was just a high level question. That's good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mrs. Cameron. Any old business? The only thing we have on the agenda is, and we just put this on there in case they want to give us some updates for Golf Manor. If you have anything to report or.
Yeah, I can, I know in the previous meetings, it was discussed, the inventory and the valuation were discussed. I've completed what I call a draft of the valuation of the assets at Station 47. And I've submitted those to Lieutenant Thompson at Station 66. I met with him a few weeks ago and we hammered out a plan to how we were going to attack this. So the valuation on my end has been completed for Station 50, or a draft has been completed and sent over to Lieutenant Thompson. I would say that I had a little bit of a challenge in that, or it was a little challenging. The records for a lot of the assets aren't very good. So some of the vehicles, there's not a purchase date in the internal firehouse system, nor was there a purchase price entered. So it created somewhat of a challenge for some of these assets to do some of the depreciation. So anyhow, I wanted to mention that that has been finished on our end. I will follow up with Lieutenant Thompson. I asked him to review his or review my work, and then we will discuss his work, and we'll put it all together for one document to share with everybody who wants to review it. So again, as far as that's concerned, I think we're on the right track of getting it finished completely. I don't know if this is the time or the place to mention it though, but some of the, I think we need to have a discussion, and hopefully we can have it tonight or at the next meeting, about how we are going to plan replacing some capital assets, regardless of what the future is of Gulf Manor in this fire district. I think we have a responsibility for our firefighters to ensure that the PPE we give them, their turnout gear, is within the 10-year life cycle. So one of the things I was somewhat surprised about in doing the asset inventory and then the valuation is in Gulf Manor at Station 47, there's only 4 complete sets that are within the 10 years. So that's the pants, the boots, the jacket, and the helmet. 4 sets. And we have some 30, I don't have the roster in front of me, total firefighters out of Station 47. So I think that we need to really, really consider how we're going to move forward on developing a plan on getting turnout gear that's not at the end of its life cycle or already expired. The other asset that I think we need to also consider is the portable radios. There's a valuation of $100 on those. And it's my understanding each firefighter, when they're working, is supposed to have a working radio. They're at the end of their life cycle too. I spoke to Motorola and Mobilcom about that. We'd be lucky to get $100. If one breaks, they're unlikely to be able to fix it because they're not making the components for those portable radios any longer. So again, I think hopefully we can at least discuss how we're going to move forward in updating some of this equipment.
Chief, isn't that what you and I were talking about this morning? And Captain Young's going to be working on some kind of a grant or something for radios?
Yeah, and the Hamilton County Chiefs Association has also put in for a grant for radios, and for whatever reason, we've been turned down. So they're going to try again to put this grant in, or for a grant, but we'll just have to wait and see. But I mean, some of the departments that are, should we say, they have quite a bit of money. They've already bought their own radios, so they went ahead and purchased their radios on their own instead of waiting for the county to do that.
And that's one of the reasons why I would advocate a plan. So I understand the funding structure historically for a lot of fire departments, and it's not just Little Miami, but is relying on grants. And to me, that's not really a plan. There's nothing strategic about it other than we're sitting down, we're devoting time to develop the application and sending it in. I think we were fortunate this year in that we carried over $416,000. Maybe there's an opportunity for us to develop some sort of plan, maybe not to replace all the radios, but some of them. Maybe not replace, and I wouldn't advocate replacing all the turnout gear all at one time, but using some of that to develop a plan on how we get into a cycle of replacing turnout gear so that we're not in this position, whatever happens with the fire district, we're not in a position where all 100 pieces of turnout gear is now expired. And what would have been a $10,000 expense every year is now going to be a $100,000 expense at one time. And it will, I really would advocate us considering how we're going to, developing a plan for how we're going to approach this, because I'm reasonably certain that the condition at Station 66 isn't all that much different than the conditions of Station 47.
I would like to thank Andy for always being on point with a number of his future planning conversations with the board. When I came on board in April of this past year, Mike Lemon and Carson and Jenny and also David Kubicki briefed me on some of the matters most serious to the district. And in the context of the overall budget, what was explained to me was that first we needed to make sure that we look at every expense and make sure that the money that we were spending was necessary for day-to-day operations to stabilize the operational side. And then we would need to turn our attention immediately to exactly what Andy just described, both the safety equipment side, so radios and turnout gear, and then also the major vehicles and major equipment. And we all know that those are $100,000, if not $1 million plus conversations. And I know that Mike Lemon, who is working on our end as a consultant to look at options for the Little Miami moving forward, has been doing a dive into lease options or purchase options and has been talking to a number of different districts, including Deer Park Silverton, who recently replaced this past year. I think it was I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact amount. I'm thinking it was $800,000 worth of radios. It was some very large sum. And also they are doing lease to purchase on, or did a lease to purchase on some of the major equipment. So I appreciate that Andy is very forthright in reminding all of us that these are very important things that are before the board, and that I further appreciate that Gulf Manor in this year that we continue to have together as partners, that we can work cooperatively to look at best practices of other fire districts and departments and come up with a plan that we respectively can take to our districts, departments, and our 2022 versions of our fire delivery services. And so I so much appreciate these conversations. We definitely have that responsibility to our people. We have that responsibility to our fire crews. And I know that I have these conversations, and I'm sure that Ms. Kaminer does as well, when we're looking at Columbia's equipment, safety equipment, vehicles, and such. What's an appropriate life cycle? At what point do we need to stop fixing things and buy new? But if we can't afford, or if it's not appropriate at that time, where could we share equipment or other vehicles with other agencies? And so we have those conversations in our own respective communities. So we definitely should have those conversations with the fire district. So thank you.
I have a question. What does a full set of turnout gear cost ballpark? Anybody?
Yeah. I have 2016 numbers and I looked into it a little bit. Maybe Chief Timmers can provide additional clarity, but in the numbers I was working from, it was about $2,600 a set
That's per man, we'll say,
per
correct?
man, per person.
Yes.
And you're probably looking about 3,500 now.
Right.
So Terry, with that being said, at 3,500, how many do we need or would we need to replace right now? If we had to replace them right now, how many would we?
If we had to replace them now, we would probably need at least 30 sets.
I'm going to ask a question. Why have we let it go so far?
Once again, you know, we went with grants. You know, that was always, you know, past practice is how we paid for it. So.
And I don't want to, I don't want to, I've only been part of this for almost a year now. So I don't want to speak out of school about this, but I think at least in Station 47, I think there was an idea of how many sets were within the time frame, but I don't think anyone really knew until I went through and counted each and every one. And I think it's sort of a inventory management challenge, or that indicates that there's some sort of inventory management challenge that the district faced. So it may have been easy to slip through the cracks because no one really had a good idea on you know, how many turnout gear were aging out at any given time.
Correct.
So I could jump in here. I want to kind of support the idea from personal experience and what I've also seen Gulf Manor really accomplish in the last 5 years with things like we had police vehicles, and we now are on a cycle because we had replaced too many at once, and it was a burden for us to get through, but we go through them, and now you can actually see it, how much more comforting it is when a vehicle comes up to be, you know, replaced. We've got the money, or at least part of it, sitting there. One thing that's important to realize about grants is it's easier to get grants if we have money to put toward it too. Like if you're applying for a grant and say we have 10,000, but we need another 10, it actually increases your chances because you are contributing to it. If you're just relying on them, it really leaves up to chance whether we'll get it in time. And that, to me, you know, we have a duty, like it says Mel, sorry, says to the firefighters, to the residents, that all that stuff is really up to snuff and keeping them safe. And it's a sense of pride too, that at least confidence that my gear is appropriate. So what I've seen us do, it may be easier than all of us discussing it in a planning stance, but of course we can do that. I'm not saying no. Is if there's 2 or 3 people that can form a committee from here, go off and really digest this and put something forth back for us to look at. And then we can kind of chew on it again as a whole group. Of course, I'll do whatever you guys want, but just an idea to throw in.
I was going to make that suggestion. For right now, why can't Terry form a team to look at the equipment that we have and see what, like Andy and Roger have said, we don't have to replace everything at once. What kind of a time frame do we have that we can maybe replace 2 or 3 a year down the road as we go down the road? And in the meantime, you get a team together to look at the equipment that we have to see where it stands. As where is it in its life cycle? If it's over it, how far over, and let's go start with that and see where we're at.
Yeah, we want to encourage a cycle of equipment.
Right.
So we are here today and we want to get out of it. So maybe, like you said, we'll pick the 10 worst or whatever it is. And that's our first thing, but we'll begin the cycle of, so that every, like Andy said, every year or whatever it is, we'll have a regular expense to replace stuff as it.
If we have something like that and we go by a cycle, we can tell from year to year what we need to replace, and we'll know in advance what we need to get rid of.
Exactly.
So can you do that, Terry?
Yeah, I can. I'll get with Lieutenant McGinnis and firefighter Higgins, who's in charge of gear at both stations, and to give me a list and we can go from there.
Yeah, the other thing I might suggest, this is my nature, is I don't always want to go out and create something new. I may, if there's a best practices produced by the National Fire Association or some other stations that are actually doing it, go out and see what they're doing, or find that information first and then see where we can fit into it. So we don't have to necessarily do all the creative work ourselves, other than inventory. And say, okay, where do we find that?
Okay.
I brought that up last time with best practices. There's something out there that's probably going to coach us to know how to put this together in different pieces of it.
Now, can we lump the radios in with the turnout gear, or should that be a separate account, or how? Because you don't want to have to go buy $100,000 worth of radios in a year.
I mean, once again, we can break it into, 5 at a time or whatever the board wants to do.
Yeah, I think
and
I think the nice thing is when the inventory is finished at Station
Correct.
66, and once we have that one document together, we're going to have a really good idea at that point what the true inventory needs are of the district. And I think that's the starting point, is identifying what those needs are. And then I think it will be on us to decide, well, how much we want to appropriate each year to getting whatever those needs are.
I think we talked a couple times in prior board meetings, because Andy has brought this up, that once we have the inventory in hand, it's the holy grail, so to speak, that we can do a lot of forward strategic planning from that. And I know that my trustees have committed publicly in our trustee meetings a number of times to our community, to this board, and also in direct conversations with Carson and others, and Brian can vouch for this, that because Fairfax invested $400,000 in the fire district a couple of years ago to help stabilize the budget, and we deferred the payment that was due to Fairfax last year in order to have a stronger carry forward and for other reasons. And so Columbia, we set aside funds in our budgeting process in 2020 for 2021 that we would contribute up to the same amount that Fairfax did in order to address some of these needs in terms of safety equipment, vehicles, or other needs that the fire district may have. At the time, the feedback was, let's get through 2020, see what our standing is, get through the inventory process, and start identifying what our most immediate needs are, and then needs beyond that, and sequence, which is what we're talking about last night. So we're all on board in terms of what we need to do and what documents we need, and then agreeing to get together and map out a plan. And then when we look at how we would sequence equipment replacement and vehicle replacement, then we need to take into account if we feel that we can do that cash flowing from the current budget, or if you want to reach out to the commitment that Columbia has made to make sure that we're a strong partner in the fire district. So let's keep that in mind as well. And as I said, Michael, and then working directly for my trustees, has been doing a number of things. I know that he touches with all of you at some point, generally every month, but we would want him involved in that process as well.
Any other comments? Okay, thank everyone for comments that you have made. And we know, we all know that it's something we have to work on, and we'll work on together as a team.
So real quick, did we put together a task force for this of sorts? I'm trying to figure out what happened here.
Do you want to do that now, or do you want to wait till we get a report back from Terry?
I think what Chief Timmer suggested was that you would be handling it somewhat in-house with your lieutenant staff, your people whose area of management.
Correct, Andy.
Uniforms.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I didn't quite catch that. Thank you.
We'll wait till we get a report back from Chief Timbers, and then we'll go from to what we have to do then.
I have one quick question. First of all, thanks. This is a great conversation. Thanks, Andy, for bringing it up. How urgent is that? That sounds like dire to me when you state that there's only 4 sets at your station, and I'm not sure if it's similar at the Station 66 as well. Can someone talk about how, is that typical? Is that seems like urgent to me?
Well, it on some of it, it really depends on when that gear was bought, and like Andy said, that on the year, it's usually a 10-year cycle on the gear. So, but once again, it depends on how it's used. In our neck of the woods, we don't get that many fires, so it's not used in a lot of heat and fighting the fire. So it probably could last an extra couple years. So that's usually the way that we've been operating.
So I think what you're saying, then, Terry, is that if it was somebody like the city of Cincinnati, their lifetime or life expectancy would be real short compared to a department like ours, where
Exactly.
That's the same with the fire equipment too, the trucks and everything else too.
Right.
Remember that we are lifetime on the vehicles. We're over that line too on vehicles. But
Correct.
everybody says, how much engine time you have on it and how much it's ran makes a big difference between what kind of community you work in as far as your.
Correct. Yeah.
So Chief Timbers, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the when we're talking about PPE, the turnout gear, that 10 years is the recommendation of your professional organization.
Well, that's by the NFPA. Yeah.
Right.
So, but you go ahead, Andy.
What I was going to say is it's not an arbitrary timeline. It's industry best practice.
Correct. Yeah.
So you're going to say at 10 years, it's not automatically you got to throw it out.
Right.
But,
exactly.
No, they don't throw it out.
But as a firefighter, would you be comfortable going into a fire with an 8-year-old suit versus, a 5-year-old suit?
Right. Exactly.
Well, is there possibility that there's improvement in the material or the way they're made and things like that? So to me, even if it's never been in a fire, it still could put a fireman at risk if there was something that might have saved that person that they wasn't available. So it's not just exposure. I think it is technology and improvements and things.
Exactly. How it's made and in the manufacturer and all that stuff. Absolutely.
So just as a suggestion, and I'm not an expert by any stretch, but wouldn't it be better to have an 8-year turn as a goal? That way you're not, like you say, you don't want all your equipment turning over in 10 years, because who can afford that?
You're right, Joe. Yeah. You'd be better to do it, on
a plan forward, but I know you can't do it now, but I mean,
right. Well, like you said, we set a goal, and if we can keep doing that, that would help.
So you're saying we needed about 30 sets?
Yes.
So when we can get this set up, if we do like 3 a year for a 10-year plan and then keep it rotating, that would cover the 30.
Correct.
Sets. Okay.
Yep.
But was that 30, this 30 total for both
Yes.
stations?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
so I guess what Andy was, I'm sorry, but I guess what Andy was asking is, okay, we replaced 4 sets this year. When the Gulf Manor split happens, what happens to those 4 new,
Gulf Manor doesn't care what happens to them.
No.
I want to make sure that the firefighters are going in as safely. We ask a lot of these firefighters, and we ask them to do some things that I'm not willing to do. When I see a fire, I'm running away, they're running in, And I think it's important that if we're going to ask them to do that, that we are providing the tools and the equipment to ensure that they're able to get out when they want to get out.
Oh, I believe that's the board's job. That's why we're here. That's what I hope.
And yeah, and it's the radios too. I mean,
I don't think any of us here knew how bad or how worn or old our equipment is. I mean, how will we know?
The other thing too is not only is it cycling equipment and money that you can appropriate on a regular basis, but you also stay in the cycle of grants. If someone is only doing a grant when we need a certain thing, you get out of practice of that. You get out of tune with what's available. And if you're doing this on an ongoing basis, you might be able to replace 6 one year, 3 another, 10 another. But as long as there's a cycle to it and somebody can continually kind of be involved in that grant realm, because it is complicated, but the more you're in tune with it, the easier it is. That's all part of the whole picture of getting it, of cycling these things. So.
Any other comments? Thanks everybody for their input. On to new business. Before we get into the resolutions, I do have something. As everybody knows, this is the year that we have to go and start our Cba negotiations. What I would like to do is form a committee to look at our Cba that we have right now and go over the items in there to see if there's anything that we think that you think we should be changing, or what kind of negotiation plans we have for the unions this year. And I'm sure the union's doing the same thing right now, is getting theirs prepared. So sometime around July, August, we probably need to get our letter in for intent to negotiate and start negotiating. And I would really love to have our negotiations finished before the last minute, and so that we are set going into next year. So if there's anybody that's willing to serve on a committee, Andy, I was going to ask you if you would for sure, and maybe lead it, and then get a couple more members from the board to work with you and go over the agreement with Chief Timbers.
Sure.
So is there a couple more that would like to volunteer for this committee?
Well, Brian and I will talk about a representative from Columbia. I believe if we can't have more than 2?
With this,
on a committee.
Because it's a public hearing, we can have 3, but it would have to be posted with the.
Yeah.
Yeah, but otherwise it should be just 2, I would say.
So Brian and I will have that conversation also with Mike, and then we'll circle back to you.
Alan, is that correct?
Well, if you have a committee meeting, you're going to have to post it anyway,
right?
Because it's an independent body that's subject to the sunshine law. But I think you can have 3 on it. Wouldn't go more than that, but you're going to have to post it regardless.
So even if it's 2, we have to post a meeting no matter what.
Yeah, if you're forming an actual committee, it's got to meet publicly. Yeah.
Okay. So versus just an ad hoc getting together. I mean, a committee that supports, like an official subcommittee of the board would trigger that, or just 2 or 3 individuals that get together over 4 or 5 months for a specific purpose and then end, versus a finance committee or an equipment committee. Could there be some kind of distinction between those? Not that we're trying not to post meetings, but it's just the administrative aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk offline.
A working group is not a committee. I wouldn't.
Right, we can talk offline about the structure of it. And if you're going to talk to Brian about who you want to be on it, let's just take that time to figure out what it has to look like. But if we're going to call it a committee and it's going to be designated by the board, I think to err on the side of caution, we're going to need to keep it open. But we can look at whether we can have a different kind of working group.
We're always happy to do that where it's appropriate. I just want to make sure that we're following the rules. So we'll get back to you guys. Thank you.
So Andy, I'll go ahead and still put you in charge of whatever,
Sure.
however we go about this, and then we'll decide what we can do as far as the meeting.
Yeah, so in terms of marching orders, I think I just need to know what's the structure of it's going to be, and then we can take it from there.
Sounds good. So I'll get with Alan on that and we'll come up with something.
And I know that we already have, I forget how many, but we already have 15 or so of the new collective bargaining agreements from districts and departments in the region already as part of work that we've been doing. And then with Mike, and then also with my peer township administrator groups, as soon as they conclude collective bargaining and have an agreement on police or fire, we submit it to a pool and we all share it. So we already have done the heavy lifting on the research of peer agencies. So we don't have to revisit that, redo that.
Okay. Right. Anything else? Okay, on to resolution R1 2021. Jenny, we can't hear you. Can't hear you.
You're muted, Jenny.
Yeah, I just realized that. Sorry. To provide for the current expenditures and other expenses of the Little Miami Joint Fire and Rescue District during the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2020, by transferring funds from the Ambulance and Emergency Medical Services Fund salaries to Ambulance and Emergency Medical Services Fund EMS supplies. Again, this is simply transferring monies from the payroll account in that particular fund, $760 to EMS supplies to take care of the year-end balance in 2020.
Does anybody have any other questions for Mrs. Cameron on this? Okay, at this time, I'm open for a motion to adopt resolution R1 2021.
So
I'll
moved.
motion. Oh, I'll second.
Who was first, Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Yes.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Hudson,
Yes.
Mr. Lamar,
Yes.
Mr. Lancer,
Yes.
Mr. Shelton,
Yes.
Ms. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Van Harn.
Yes.
Next order of business under new business is every year we have a committee. It's called a Volunteer Firefighters Dependents Fund. What this is a we've never had to use it, and I hope we never do. In case of a tragedy were to happen, this committee would go to the individual's house. In the past, last year, it was myself, Mr. Hirth, Chief Timmers, and firefighter Bowman. Mr. Bowman is no longer with the district. And we also had Reverend Todd Keys from the Marymount Community Church, I believe it is, or something of that nature. He's also on the committee, who is, he has never refused to do this for us. So I will be giving him a call to make sure that he wants to. But what I need at this time is two members of the board. I will do it again if nobody else wants to, but I also need another member of the board. Chief Timber says that he will serve, and Captain Young is going to serve. So we need one more member from the board to serve on this committee. I have a volunteer from anybody.
I'm happy to do it.
So I have myself, Mr. Lancer, Chief Timbers, Rob Young, and Reverend Keats.
Excuse me, Andy, I was going to volunteer, but my mute button wasn't working, just so you know.
Roger, by all means, you'd be great.
If you don't mind,
No, I don't mind at all.
okay, you're doing quite a bit, and I have a heart for this, but my button wasn't working. All right, thanks.
So, Roger.
Myself, Mr. Van Horn, and Chief Timbers. Firefighter Young and Reverend Keys. Jenny, is there anything we need to read on that other than that? Or?
No, but of those board members just announced, one has to serve as a chairperson. In the unfortunate event the committee ever has to convene, if there is a firefighter that has a death in the line of duty, as well as one of the board members to serve as the official secretary. And that secretary has to sign the form that's in the packet. I'll take care of getting everything filled out and get it mailed back in to where it needs to go. But of those just named, one needs to serve as the chairperson, who I imagine would be the person to convene any meeting that would be necessary in that unfortunate event, and then one to serve as the secretary. And again, this is an annual appointment. We'll be doing this again next January, but this is an annual thing we must do every year.
Jenny, in the past, haven't we had the chief serve as secretary?
That is correct. That has been past practice, correct?
So, Carrie, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm all right with that person.
So if it's okay with the rest of them, I'll serve as the president or whatever it's called.
Chair?
Yep. So it's Chief Summers as secretary and myself as chairperson. And like I said, we've never had to use it, and I hope we never do.
Amen.
On the fire chief's report.
Okay. We just got done talking about one vehicle, and we had another vehicle that was involved in a rear end over on Red Bank Road. So I am working with that one now. We got the other one back. So under the vaccines, we had 19 people take the vaccine. And we are scheduled next Wednesday to get our second dose. Some of the firefighters are saying that the only symptoms that they had were just being sore in where they got their shot. So, but I've had talked with other fire chiefs, and they're saying that this second dose is the one that kind of knocks you down. So hopefully we don't have to worry about that. That's all I have, unless you have any questions about the run numbers.
I have a comment about the run numbers, but I wanted to make sure before I made it that do I understand correctly that the report that you gave us for this meeting was through December, so it is a complete report for 2020 of all runs?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so being the statistics geek that I am, and I have shared before that there are a number of people who follow this meeting who appreciate this type of information. For the total runs, total volume of runs, I have just shy of 2,000 for the year, 1,967. And you have a chart that breaks out 21 different entities that we make runs to, the Little Mammy makes runs to. Is that correct? Am I following this correctly?
Yes.
Chief Timmers, okay.
Yeah.
So looking at 2020 overall, in order of the most runs to particular communities, it looks like Columbia with Gulf Manor a close behind us as second. At Columbia is over 35% of the total runs, and Gulf Manor is just under 35% or under 35% of the total runs. And then in third is Fairfax with just under 17% of the runs. The three of our communities make up 86% of the total runs. That leaves 14% of runs to other communities. And interesting to note that in fourth, tied for fourth most runs by Little Miami, are Elmwood Place and Marymount, with both approximately the same, about 3.5%. So those two together, those two other communities together represent 7% of Little Miami runs. All other communities are nowhere near the volume. They are either right around 1% or a fraction of a percent. So just to recap, Columbia and close behind Gulf Manor, majority of the runs, first and second, Fairfax in third, and then at fourth, Elmwood Place and Marymount, and then all others are a smaller degree.
Mm-hmm.
Chief, with the Elmwood situation has, I think you reported last time that St. Bernard has withdrawn their runs. And we
Well,
only do it.
Yeah, from what I was told is that the St. Bernard and Elmwood Place have not had any meetings whatsoever. So I don't know where that stands. I'll have to get with
So
Chief
what
Young.
has that done to us in the last couple?
Well, knock on wood, we haven't had that many runs to Elmwood since we've made that decision to not to respond when we're at 3.
Okay.
So
I guess Melissa's just given the quality of runs and the amount of runs that we've had. So with the Elmwood runs that we've had in the past, most of them were the first 2/3 of the year, correct?
correct.
So we really cut down on the runs for Elmwood.
Yes, we have.
And
Am
also,
Can I jump in? Am I reading this wrong? Because what I'm reading is we had 8 in December, EMS runs in December, which would be the second highest total per month for the year.
that is, that's showing
It just seems like it goes in waves where you can really tell. Correct me if I'm wrong again. It seems like you can tell when we're on them, they don't call. But the next month, when we kind of take our foot off the pedal a little bit, we're right back up to 8 or 10.
Right, exactly. That's where when I was asked from Chief Young to kind of put pressure on Elmwood for us not to respond, that they would call St. Bernard to try to get them to, step up to the plate and make a decision. But apparently it's not doing any good.
it's the 8 runs. Is that EMS runs?
Yes,
And then the fire runs of none for December?
correct.
Okay. Melissa, I think I've said this before, and I've told you this before. A lot of the, and Terry, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the Marymount runs goes with a understanding that we have with Marymount that since the Marymount district business district they've got to come through Fairfax to get to it. We have an understanding or an agreement that if there is a run down there at the business district, that we go first because we are closer. But in return, if there's anything on the east side for the Little Miami Joint District down in Columbia Township and all that, if Marymount can, they will respond first down there. Is that still in place, Terry?
Correct.
So if we looked at their numbers, we would see that reciprocity. And again, I'm just quoting the statistics. I'm not, it's not a policy or a judgment. It's just more informational.
Right.
For us to look at more than just numbers, for us to make the numbers speak back to us, to help guide policy, but it's not a policy decision, just kind of reporting the numbers. So, but I think it's helpful for those of us who are new on the board, like me, Andy, and also for our respective communities who follow us, to understand where there's value in those types of shared services and where there's a cost to that exceeds what should be reasonable. And it's on an individual community partner by community partner basis. And so these are, once again, really good conversations for us to have. So thank you for clarifying that. I did not know that.
You have any other questions for the chief? Thanks, chief.
No problem.
Any board of trustees discussion? Hearing none, we're open for adjournment. Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Carson, before we end, I forgot to mention, Mr. Van Horn, you can let your daughter know that the men and women of Station 47 will be sleeping very well because they got new sheets and comforters with the money that your daughter raised. So again, tell her thank you very much.
I will. Thank you for passing that on. I appreciate it.
Any other comments? Had the motion and had a second. All in favor of adjourning? Say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.